First of all, good afternoon to you all, and thanking you for making the time to be present at this call, which is considering the circumstances that we find ourselves in. It is very important for our well-being, and we've got two eminent doctors who are going to help us along the way address some of our questions. The way we have structured this 1 hour is we will have an initial talk by the Vice President ICEMA, and then I'll introduce the doctors who will cover the general subjects that are going to be touched upon broadly to give you a sense of what kind of questions can be put into the chat box. And while you put the questions into the chat box, I will continue to address some of the questions that have already been raised to the doctors, and that's how it's going to be. So again, I want to thank President ICEMA, Vice President ICEMA, all the governing council members of ICEMA who have been a constant source of support to all of us through this crisis again, just like in the last time. And they have guided us well in arranging this series of talks. The first two, covering the physical aspects or health aspects of the virus, of the pandemic. And this session, of course, will be focused on the emotional well-being or the mental health of people who are going through this crisis. So I would now request Vice President ICEMA and Managing Director Volvo CE in India, Dimitrov Krishnan, to begin the proceedings with a small talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope my voice is audible. And first and foremost, welcome everybody to this webinar, which is the ICEMA's contribution to our members, their families, and also everyone who has joined here. I'm sure some of you have attended, or many of you would have attended our earlier sessions that covered the one of us was about the understanding COVID-19 overall, and the second one, which we did specifically focus on women and child health. We got a very good response from the audience. We have also followed the development in the YouTube channels where we have been posting these videos, and quite a good viewership that we have noticed. So in continuation of that expert talk series, I welcome you to the third session in the series, which is on mental health amid COVID-19, which is being held today. We are all passing through unprecedented times when the entire nation is in the grip of this severe second wave of COVID-19. While it has been very widespread in its reach and has impacted everybody in society, it has also at the same time given rise to a lot of challenges from mental health perspective among people in these times. Faced particularly with the new realities of working from home, in some cases temporary unemployment, homeschooling of children, the fears coming out of contracting the virus, or the challenges of treatment, lack of physical contact or isolation, all of these have contributed heavily towards mental health challenges in this last 1 year or so. And particularly with the second wave and the widespread, this is further exacerbated. So we will talk to the medical experts to go deeper into the mental health aspects around COVID-19 and what can we do and to manage this in this time. It is my pleasure to welcome the esteemed speakers for the session, Dr. Rishi Gupta and Dr. Ananya Mahapatra, whom Vijay will introduce shortly. I also welcome my colleague Vijay, who is the co-convener of the promotion panel and also the head of external affairs and CSR in Tata Hitachi. Let me, before we start, highlight what ICEMA as an association has been doing as initiatives during this time. Some of the initiatives that we have taken up is, of course, we've contributed substantially to the CII Foundation, which is working across the country to support members of the industry and also sourcing vital life-saving equipment. ICEMA has set up a national helpline to provide free doctor consultation to ICEMA member company employees and their families. Today, I can confirm that we've also extended this facility to all our dealer partners, their families, as well as our supplier partners and their staff. So today we have widened the spread of this consultation support, this national helpline, to all of them. So we hope to serve a larger community with this additional support that we're doing. In addition, we have also initiated and brought the oxygen concentrators that have been positioned across the country in different member companies, and will be made available to employees as and when it is required for the treatment of affected. We have also set up COVID task forces in various cities, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Pune, Bangalore, Calcutta, Hyderabad, and Chennai are coming up as well. And in using these task forces, we are actually able to help member companies' employees to get access to the necessary requirements they have got. I request all members, to those who are and their families, to make full use of these services. The helpline particularly is very useful for your extended family, and it's free of cost consultation by doctors. Please use it. And again, I welcome all of you to the expert talk. Wish everybody good health ahead. And I would like to now hand over to you, Vijay. And what I will do is I'll follow the chat box on the Zoom, and also to see if there are any questions coming up, and at the right time, I'll also bring them in so that we can make this interaction much more livelier and interactive. With that, hand over to you, Vijay.
Thank you, DK. So it's now my pleasure to introduce two doctor panelists. Dr. Rishi Gupta, of course, is a consultant psychiatrist and a de-addiction specialist, and also a product of the reputed AIIMS in Delhi. Dr. Ananya Mahapatra, also from AIIMS, and she's a senior consultant in psychiatry, especially focused on treatment and well-being of pregnant women, and also conducts workshops for children during this time of crisis to manage their emotional well-being. So thank you both, Dr. Ananya and Dr. Rishi, for joining this call. Now, I request Dr. Rishi Gupta to display a slide in which he will pretty much show us what are the subjects that we will be covering during the course of this 1 hour. So you can have a look at the topics that are going to be broadly covered, and if you have any questions against them, please put them in the chat box. And while you do so, I will be focusing on other questions that have already come to us. So Dr. Rishi Gupta, could you pull up that slide onto the screen, please? Yeah, so these are the broad categories which will be covering an aspect of managing the illness, and we'll get into these aspects, the various aspects of it, including the recovery, the anxiety, etc., management of the disease. Second part of it will be covering the other aspects of the COVID impact, which is the financial, occupational difficulties, personal loss and bereavement, etc. These points will be covered. And the third, also very equally important point is, while many of us are staying in place or working from home, how do we deal with the work-life balance at this point in time? Many of us have children that need to be managed, and they're schooling from home. That comes with a host of attendant problems. There are also, issues within the family of managing, the business of getting along with life, your daily life, at the same time attending to these calls so that your work doesn't lag behind. These obviously will cause some pressures. How do we cope with them? And then a little bit of a look into the future. How we planning to come out of this crisis? When is it going to end? Some of these questions, we may not have precise answers, but we will certainly look at some of the ways in which we can look for a positive end to this apparently unending kind of nightmare situation. So with that, I can request, may I request Dr. Rishi Gupta to take the slide off, and we will go into the questions. DK, please feel free to interject at any point in time should you have any other question or point of view. So
I will bring up my points as and when. So I put my video on whenever I need to do that.
Sure, thank you very much. So I'll start off with the first question, which of course is the health aspect of it. Many of us are staying in place, but living in constant dread. Which is the next point of contact through which possibly I could, I could put myself in some danger of infecting myself or anybody else in my family. So there's a tremendous fear of contracting the disease, which is creating an anxiety. So in your opinion, Dr. Rishi Gupta, how does one handle this?
Thank you, Mr. Vijay Kumar. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That's a very, very pertinent question. This constant fear of, sort of contracting it, the fear of the unknown, by and large, this is an enemy which is invisible to us. And that essentially is the source of anxiety. The source of anxiety may or may not be the pathology associated with the illness, but the fact that it is out of our controls. So the first and foremost thing which is important is to be well informed about how this illness spreads and what are the chances of contracting it. So just quickly 2 or 3 points regarding how does it not spread. It does not spread by generally being in the atmosphere, which is one of the biggest fears which people have in today's day and age. So it only spreads, it only has a high chance of spreading if we have prolonged contact with somebody who is positive and in an infected stage, and either of the people, the one who is infected and the one who is not infected, not following COVID appropriate behavior. So that was regarding the informational side of it. From the psychiatry side of it, the first and foremost thing which we have to take care of is staying well informed and then doing certain things which reduce anxiety in general, in addition to reducing the COVID related anxiety. So I would say that we should do a bit of information detox. We should do social media distancing. We should just keep one source of information, which by and large is a reliable source. Only follow that source of information, not look at other sources. For example, if we have a certain media outlet or if we have a certain person in our lives who gives us information, we must limit our source of information to that. The second thing is that we should make it clear in our mind what is appropriate and what is too much. So for example, washing hands and maybe taking a quick bath after we come home from work is appropriate, but washing vegetables with soap and washing doors and other household items with soap every day is probably inappropriate. So after discussion with a certain competent authority, which may be a well-informed person in the family or a reliable source, we must lay down ground rules as to what we are going to follow and what is too much, and stick to that. And in addition, maintain a routine throughout our day, which revolves around, following this COVID appropriate behavior. That is going to reduce the anxiety related to COVID to a significant effect.
Interesting point that you raised about what to do and what not to do and what is doing too much, because at every point during the last 1.5 years, the kind of information that is being put out about what is right and what is not right and has actually led to a lot of confusion in people's minds, and has led to a situation where people are actually paranoid about everything, right? So where does one draw the line between doing just the right amount or doing too much?
That's in fact a pretty tricky question, because honestly, that line is a little blurry. We have had people who started out taking the appropriate behavior, but unfortunately we've had people who have landed up in frank OCD. So I would say that the guidelines, at least one set of guidelines today, say that 40 seconds of hand washing with plain water or using a mild sanitizer is good enough as far as hand sanitization goes. A normal 3-layered mask, nothing fancy. Hand sanitization every time we go out or interact with somebody, not sanitizing the hands every 5 minutes at home when we have not been exposed. So I would say that would probably be enough. Of course, wearing mask, wearing protective gear, avoiding crowded places, avoiding enclosed spaces, these are definitely things which we have to do. But certain things like sanitizing our hands ad nauseum, probably even leading to damage to the skin, is something which we must definitely avoid.
Thank you. So I have one more question to you before I switch to Dr. Ananya, which is, people contract the disease and there is so much of fear psychosis already having been created around it that I think some of the damage to their well-being is actually caused by the anxiety, more about the anxiety of the disease, about the disease rather than the disease itself. So in your experience, have you seen these situations?
So again, as you have rightly pointed out, the disease itself causes illness, but the fear of the disease is causing and almost, I would say, an equal, if not greater number of people to suffer even without contracting the disease. In fact, we have certain terms called ATPD, acute transient psychotic disorder, which is precipitated by acute stress. And we are getting people who have illnesses like ATPD just because of, it has been declared that the illness is on the rise, or those who have had certain family members who have contracted COVID or who have recovered from COVID, suffering from illnesses like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which we normally see in people who have undergone major stress threatening their lives. For example, after somebody has been involved in a war or something like that. These illnesses are now surprisingly cropping up in people who have not even had a close brush with COVID. And again, I would say the way around this is proper information, avoiding misinformation, and looking at the reality being that this illness is affecting a far smaller proportion of people than what we have built up in our minds. Secondly, yes, there is risky behavior, but with appropriate behavior, the risk of transmission is very low. And thirdly, God forbid, even if we get this illness, with the correct management, and it doesn't take rocket science, with correct appropriate management, the morbidity and mortality is far lower than what probably we think it is. We have a bit of selection bias. We always hear the bad stories. We always remember the bad stories. But for every unfortunate incident, there are hundreds in whom people have recovered, and people with grave comorbidities, with grave risk, have also recovered. So if we focus on this, I feel that the morbidity of anxiety which has been associated with this illness will definitely go down.
Yeah, I like this point that you made about selectively remembering only the bad experiences, and I think this social media and our TV channels are by and large, exclusively almost devoted to spreading this plethora of images of very bad situations, and that builds up the fear psychosis. So I'll just follow up my earlier question with this. You mentioned staying away from social media to the extent possible, but then people also look at social media as a source of staying connected. As in some part of this welter of information that is flowing towards you, there could be some nuggets that could actually be useful. So how do you filter out the messages that are reaching you?
If we take social media as a source of information, and at the risk of sounding controversial, I would say that anybody who identifies themselves as being unnaturally affected by the amount of information, social media is probably something which we should definitely stay absolutely clear of. In today's day and age of lockdown, probably social media is the only source of human contact which we have. But I still feel that the benefit that the social contact that it is offering is far less than the information, the risk or the damage it is doing by giving us misinformation. In scientific studies, they teach us something called levels of evidence. We have studies, we have controlled trials, we have meta-analysis, and the lowest level of evidence which we can offer is called a expert opinion, if we can call this as expert opinion. Unfortunately, social media is by and large rife with expert opinion, and expert opinion of a lot of very eloquent and a lot of very convincing people. The problem is that when somebody who speaks well says anything, however lacking in evidence base it may be, it convinces. And if that particular thing sort of resonates with your own fears, and that is unfortunately impossible to filter out. So I would say that as far as possible, we should stay off social media entirely. Pick one maybe media outlet or maybe one application which gives us good, safe, reliable, filtered information, and stick to that.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll move on to Dr. Ananya, and I have one very specific question. Since this is actually your field of work, you work with children during these times, stressful times, and run them past through some workshops which helps them adjust to the new kind of life they have to lead. So could you please tell us a little bit about what you do and what kind of impacts these workshops have? You may have to unmute yourself, Doctor. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. I have been in the last few months, especially worked with school children and some children in children's home who are now especially confined within either their four walls or in their residential homes, and all of their day-to-day activities are sort of disrupted or have come to a standstill because of this pandemic. And my work has been mainly to help them with, keeping a positive mindset. How do they go about with their routine, and how do they focus on their studies in whichever ways that are possible currently. So I would like to share the sort of, so I've been primarily working with slightly older children, 10 years onwards, and actually more towards those in the class 9 to 12, 10 to 12. So I'd like to share some of my insights that I have received while working with them in a hands-on manner. One of the major things that children are facing, children, besides eating, sleeping, and studying, they need a lot of stimulation for their online or all-round development, which they're not able to get, unfortunately. And one of the major things is academic stress, which, or probably because I work with the adolescent children who have pre-boards or boards coming up, and with the exams getting delayed and postponed. So academic stress is one thing which has been pretty much on their mind, and which has been bothering them a lot. And also the reason for that is that their whole mode of studying has suddenly changed. Children who are used to sitting in a classroom studying face-to-face from their teachers have now to shift completely to an online forum or a virtual forum, which is new not only to the children but also to the teachers who are teaching them. So a lot of technical and infrastructural issues are also at the bottom of this. So the sort of the little solutions that we can come up with, and this is something that parents also come up, a very typical complaint that parents have is that my child does not focus when his or her online classes are going on, and he or she is probably not able to receive as much information as they would have if the same class was in his or her school as previously. So that lack of concentration and that lack of ability to focus is a major issue on the children's minds as well as on their parents' mind. So there are some very simple things which I would like to suggest to people who have, especially children in that age group. Build a corner for them. Build a space at home which can be not just their virtual way of learning or mode of learning. It can be a virtual classroom for them. A very simple example that I would like to give is that suppose we watch a movie at home on our TV or on our laptop, and we watch a movie in a cinema hall, in a movie hall, in a multiplex. So our concentration or our focus on that movie is much more when we are in the movie hall, because there is no other distraction. At home, we probably will get up to grab a coffee or a cup of tea, or we'll pause the movie, take a phone call, or do something, which we don't do when we are in a multiplex. Our whole attention is there. So similarly, at home, we can try to simulate a similar environment. So build a small space for them. It need not be something fancy or elaborate, but make sure that this is the classroom area for you. So do not sit and have your breakfast there, or do not just lounge around there. Sit down to study there. Similarly, when your classes are going on, do not keep a lot of other tabs open on the computer, because you tend to get tempted to, see something on YouTube or check a message or a notification which has popped up. So these are also the sort of distractions which you kind of take away your attention from your studies. Other thing is that if a class is for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, do not get up in between to, grab a snack or go to the washroom. Basically follow all those procedures which you would have if it was your actual classroom. So children tend to just get up in the morning and sit in front of your computer, in pajamas or just in their bed clothes. So you don't attend school in pajamas. So get up in the morning, take a bath, sit down properly, have your breakfast. If you have a 1-hour class, go to the washroom before, drink water. So try to simulate the school environment as much as possible. And this is something which is true for adults also. So when we are working, since our work and home boundaries are blurred because many people are working from home and children are learning from home. So in the home, in our houses, in our homes, we have to build at least some sort of an artificial boundary between our workspace and our home space. So that is one thing that I would like to convey. And regarding smaller children, younger children in the age group of 5, 6, they need a lot of physical and sensory stimulation, which I like to tell parents, especially because their learning is multisensory. Children learn through visual stimulation, through auditory stimulation. So try to engage them in multisensory sort of activities like drawings, listening to music. You can engage them, try to make some home chores fun for them, and some sort of role-playing activities. I'd like to give you an example. Suppose you have a 4 or 5-year-old kid who you have to teach spellings, or you have to teach them words, and he or she is bored and does not want to do this exercise. Do a role-play exercise, like can put their toys in front of him or her and tell them that you be the teacher, you teach your toys. And in that process, and ask him, how will you teach? And then the child has a sort of sense of agency, sense of, being there and being in charge, and they are much more involved, and then they're much more participant. To share, and more importantly, this is also the time where we are getting, since we are in our homes, we're getting a lot of time to connect with our children in a qualitative, in a better way, in a more enriching way. So try to find some activities which you can do with your child, maybe gardening, or it will depend on the child, on their aptitude, their interests, but have some sort of one-to-one activity with the child where you can bond with them. So these are certain things which can, keep them engaged in a constructive manner and channelize this sort of energy that they have. And it will definitely
very useful suggestions for both toddlers and adolescents. I just have a follow-up question to that. DK, I know you have a question. I'll come back to you. I'll finish my follow-up question, which is, these are very good, ways by which you could get children to focus. Like the example that you mentioned about simulating a movie hall, so that they live in a little bit of a make-believe world, at least for that short duration of time. But now I'm shifting my focus away from the children to the parents who have to do all of this for them, which is, I see a situation where many parents are simultaneously working from home, and those work pressures have not reduced. So they have to focus on that, plus homework, the housework, plus also try these innovative techniques to keep their children engaged. So what is your advice for parents in these situations?
Yes. That's a very, very pertinent and very important question. I think people who have children, or those who are parents of children of any age group, are the ones who are the most stretched right now, because they have chores, they have work from home, they have kids, they have each other, their spouses, their partners, and everywhere you need to invest a lot of time and energy, and we only have 24 hours in a day. So first thing, I would like to acknowledge that yes, it is challenging for them, and whatever we do, it seems as if it's not enough and not optimum enough. So the most important thing is to accept that you're human and you can only do so much. So that is very important. Do not, we sometimes, try to overdo things. We try to be the perfect spouse, the perfect parent. And so that's not, I'm not saying that we should not do our responsibilities to how much we should, but one should also accept that yes, I can only do so much. I have this much time. And it's all right if sometimes we feel that we're not able to sort of juggle everything as well as we think we should. That's the first thing. Second is be solution focused. We have a tendency to focus on our problems. If we are solution focused, we'll be able to sort of, find little hacks, little innovative techniques, which will be unique to each household, to each person and each person's circumstance. And if we open our mind, we maybe will be able to sort of come up with something which previously would seem as if it's out of if we are out of our depth. For example, suppose you also have to cook, you also have to clean, and you also have to take care of the child. Think that when I'm going to the kitchen, can I cook intelligently so that, I can, while I'm making my breakfast, I can do some prior preparation for my lunch and dinner as well, so that I don't have to do the equal amount of work every time for every meal. Something like that. That's just a very simple example. Second thing would be effective time management. If we'll have to plan, when we have so much in our hand, we have to plan our day, so we have when can I squeeze in some time with my child, when can I accommodate some time with my partner, and etc. So that time management is another thing that is important, because if we plan our day ahead, things become somewhat manageable, if not as much as we want them to be. Third is, every household is a partnership. A clear a clear channel of communication with your partner, because two parents are, they're like the two wheels of a wagon. They have to be at the same plane. They have to be in the same page for the household to be running efficiently. So if one of them is getting stressed or is not able to handle, it's important to talk to the other partner. And for the other partner, it is important to understand and come up with some sort of a, joint, it's a joint venture. So you have to come up with solutions that involve both parties. So it's possible that we all have our strengths and weaknesses. So we can delegate duties according to that. And which is all, I mean, that's all what I mean by saying that we have to be solution focused. And it is also important to have some time of rest or relaxation, which is why I say that involve your children in the chores, especially slightly older children. Suppose you have dishes to be cleaned or certain things, we can make them into fun activities rather than seeing them as work. And children, I will tell you, are very innovative, very imaginative, and they have a lot of energy. The moment you make something fun for them and you make them feel that, yes, I am doing something and, I am in charge, they turn out spectacularly and they'll marvel you in more ways than one. And that will also take some burden off you, and don't feel guilty to involve your children. We as parents, we try to create utopian circumstances for our children, but it is important to also involve them in this whole process. That way you actually empower them and you teach them a sense of responsibility and a sense of agency. So these are some of the ways I think we can guide through these times.
Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Ananya. I think that's a pretty broad view of what can be done, some useful hacks in dealing with this current situation. I will have one more question for you later after DK towards the latter part of this program. And that question, I'm just parking it to you so that you could probably, come up with something, some kind of explanation for between the last lockdown and this lockdown. There have been similar situations where people have stayed in place, worked in place, families have been going through the same kinds of crisis. But my question to you, to which you could come back with an answer later, do you see as a qualitative difference between our experience the last time and this time based on our learning? That's a question that we could come back to. In the meanwhile, I'll go to DK. DK, I'm sure you have a couple of questions, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention about the audience. We have more than 300 people watching. Then the Q&A panels have been very, very active. So I thought I found one question which is very closely linked to what Dr. Ananya just now spoke.
Yeah.
And it was slightly different because, it says how to handle toddlers who haven't been to formal school at all. For them, what can be done when their first school is an online class? They haven't seen anything. So this was something, it's a parent's concern about toddler starting school online.
Yes, that is, I think, as a phenomenon, it is unprecedented, because I don't think any of us had ever imagined that toddlers would, people would start kindergarten online. That is something very new for teachers, for parents, and for the toddlers. So yes, it is difficult. So I think we have to start with trying to explain to the toddler in ways that they understand that what this process is, because somewhere, hopefully, they will transition into real school at some point of time. But right now, this is their reality, and this is their first reality, unfortunately. And it is somewhere better than no schooling. So we have to deal with it. So try to first explain to the toddler, because children like symbols and metaphors. You can show it as a window, or a window to the outside world. It's unique to, I think a parent has to come up with some sort of a story or a narrative which will appeal to the toddler, and explain to them that what this sort of schooling is, and how this helps to sort of connect, for them to connect with other children. So that is the best, I think, which we can do. And of course, toddlers will be attending school with some help from the parents as well. So the parents can at every point explain to them what is happening, because it is pretty difficult for such a little child to understand. But children are very perceptive, and they do catch on when we try to explain things to them in their own language, with their vocabulary and their understanding, at their level of understanding. So that is one way I think we can engage them.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Ananya. And I can take one more question for Dr. Rishi. And this was linked to what he earlier talked about. It says that how to save ourselves from fake news about the disease, as there are many videos from various medical fraternity which all sound informative and authentic. The opinion differs. We all see these videos on social media because of our curiosity. So I think you answered it, but maybe a small follow up on that might be good.
That's as I said, that's very valid. And most of the videos being made, I would err on the side of saying that most of the videos which are being made in good faith. But I came across a recent, I came across a recent post by a medico, and I think that is very, very pertinent here, that how people are perceiving the medical healthcare related to COVID, the entirety of it, the directions, the instructions, first we say this, then we backtrack on it, then we say something else. And he used just, 3 words for it: welcome to medicine. That is exactly how it is, unfortunately, for every single disease that has been there, right since times immemorial. So right from the time of, Hippocrates, when we used to feel disbalance between the phlegm and the bile, and the black bile and the yellow bile caused illness, to today's date and age, when we feel that, till last year that, HCQS was the drug. Now we have remdesivir, we have tocilizumab, we have itolizumab. So ad nauseam, that is how medical science, it evolves from morning to evening, forget about days or weeks. So that is how it evolves. And a lot of the people, when they are giving information, they're probably giving yesterday's information, which is already outdated, right? In this scenario, what I would say is follow something like either WHO or ICMR, because these are bodies which have a public responsibility. So, and they are held accountable. So the information which they pass out is by and large vetted, and is also, screened in terms of what will be the effect of this information on the public that is being delivered to. So a lot of us, when we give out information, we give out information which we feel is the best, but we do not really think of the presentation, of the context in which it is being given, of the, of the literally the words which we choose to pass out this information, which may be interpreted in a very, very different manner by different people. So for example, we may choose to say that hand washing is important. Now, I've had people who have literally denuded their hands. They've had to visit a dermatologist, get extensive treatment just because of this one line. Because see, it's a very open-ended statement that, that as opposed to that, a statement saying that, no more than 40 seconds of hand washing with plain room temperature water or momentary sanitization with a mild 30% alcohol based sanitizer is good enough. Now, so my point being that following advice from ICMR, despite whatever we may have heard from the quote grapevine, following advice from these bodies will at least prevent us from harm, if not do us any good. So I would say that as a concrete measure, we should sort of unfollow all such sources, however useful they may be, and just follow one or two important bodies. In today's date, maybe WHO or ICMR, which is more Indian specific.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Gupta. Actually, there are some channels like from the Ministry of Health as well as from many of the state governments who have released, they have these social media channels where they are releasing authentic information. For example, there is a Telegram channel of Government of Karnataka, which I follow, which not only releases new information, but when they change, they also update it and say that here this is changed. So you get an authentic mode of information. There was one question linked to this, which has come from a concerned mother, I think, and it says how to control internet addiction in teens. I would say that, maybe I would take away the teens and say in everybody. Maybe that's something more relevant. Yeah. And with that, I will hand over back to you, Vijay, after this question. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So should I answer that? Yeah.
I think we'll subsume that into another question, which I'm coming back to on excessive social media use. So DK, we'll get that question covered in that broader question. Okay. In continuation to what we discussed with Dr. Ananya, I got a couple of other things because we spoke about small children, we spoke about adolescents. Then we have, Gen Z, then you have the millennials, and then you have old people. Each one of them has their own, each one of these sets has its own problems and challenges. Now, I'm responding also to a question that came up in the chat box. How do you deal with, your parents or your distant or your relatives, someone very close to you, but old and living in isolation, and you cannot reach them because of lockdowns or travel restrictions and so on. So there are two parties that are feeling the stress, you yourself because you can't reach them, and the people concerned who are feeling isolated, they're already living in loneliness, and this has compounded it further. Whatever social circles they have also been extinguished. So what is your advice for dealing with this situation of extremely old parents or grandparents, as the case may be, who may be living in isolation?
Right. That is a very pertinent and a very important and urgent concern, I think, and we should address that. The most important, I think, the cornerstone of this whole dilemma, whether it is not just our parents or a partner who's living away or children who are for some reason not with the one of the parent or so on, is that we have to stay connected through whatever means that we have. In that way, we are living in an age where we are fortunate enough to have many technological means to connect with them. So what I think Dr. Rishi was saying is that there are two different things. One is social media like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and etc. But apart from that, as we are having a one-to-one conversation over a virtual forum, similarly, it is possible to have a one-to-one conversation over a virtual forum with our parents, with our spouses, with our relatives who are staying away. So one of the, I think, major challenges which people have faced and which I anticipate is that the elderly are often not very tech savvy. So they probably there are many people who before this pandemic would not be using so much of Zoom or Google Meet or etc. because there was no need for them to, maybe they were living with other people or they were able to at least physically meet. So that is one area of concern. But the thing is that nowadays, most of this technology is very, very teachable. It's not that complicated. And personally, I have seen people who would not even pick up a phone, get very easily used to it. And when it is your sort of last resort or when it is your only portal or your only channel of communication, people do make an effort to learn and adapt. It is just that we have to support them through it. If they're not very tech savvy, maybe we can train them, teach them through it, and they do learn. And when we're not able to meet them physically, it is very important to emotionally reassure them, make some time every day to talk to them, find out how they're doing. Also, nowadays, we are actually fortunate to get many amenities, many resources through virtual communication, say ration or vegetables or medicines. At least in the bigger cities, it is possible to get it to them even without being able to physically maybe transport it or courier it by hand or by your own means. So things are not that bleak. It is just that we have to work our way around the obstacles. And when we keep that sort of a mindset, we find that we can connect with them at an emotional level, and maybe have a, if family is not able to meet, there is a festival or something, maybe have a group Zoom chat like now. I mean, that is at least better than not meeting at all, not connecting at all. So we have to come up with these solutions which may not be the best, but that is what we have. And if we keep an open mind and if we avail them, we'll not feel as isolated as we would if we don't avail them.
Thank you. I think that's what you're saying basically is make the best of the resources that we have.
And we have a lot of them actually, if we see it from that perspective.
I just did get a message, before this call about somebody who's going through this crisis, and though he's trying all these things, he says that I'm living in constant dread. Every time the phone rings, I'm expecting bad news. But these are situations that we need to find ways around. I'm sure we can discuss this further. Maybe the scope of this call is limited to 1 hour, but maybe we can connect later on such like issues. So I will now go back to the other point which DK made, which is about internet addiction. And the larger question into which it gets subsumed, as I mentioned, is, while Dr. Rishi Gupta said, try and stay away from social media as much as possible. But then, we are staying connected through our Zoom calls, personal Zoom calls, like you just spoke about, also our office Zoom calls. And then there is also, this large, bits of time that are hanging. You don't really know what to do with it. And then you get, hooked on to Netflix or Prime Video or whatever it may be. So again, addressing DK's question on de-addiction for the kids or the adolescents, and also the older generation who tend to kind of binge watch on Netflix and other such channels. So what is your take on that, Dr. Rishi Gupta?
Yeah, okay. So tough question. Huh? So basically the thing is, in terms of the answer for teens and adults is slightly different here. For teens, my own personal take on the problem is that for teens, it's by and large an escape. It's not only during COVID that we have been seeing this problem of social media use, screen addiction, internet addiction. But by and large, what we have realized is that this issue has now become an official term over the last, say, half a decade or a decade or so. In most of the teens, this sort of thing is what we call a depressive equivalent. It's not that they're suffering from depression or anything. It's just that during this extremely difficult time in their lives, there is a transformation physically. Their hormones are, increasing, decreasing, changing. And it has clearly been proven that this change in the hormones, both in men and women, leads to a lot of psychological issues. At the same time, I'm sure that every single teen feels that their parent does not understand them at all, does not understand what they are going through, and is, just there to boss them around. It's a very natural feeling. So because now, earlier, a lot of the teens would go out, spend time with their friends, blow off steam in a lot of ways. But now, because none of that is there, so the only escape from the real world which is left is the screen. So rather than trying to tackle their habit of looking at the screens, if we can somehow make the environment such that they themselves would like to come out of the screen, or they at least feel comfortable coming out of the screen, I would say that is a better approach. So for example, we get a lot of complaints, not only about screens, things like, ye hamare saath baithta nahi hai, ye hamare saath khana nahi khata hai, he doesn't even talk to us anymore. Because a lot of times when we feel, as adults, rightfully so, our life experience is probably better than those of the teens. We know the problems which they will face if they don't sort of follow our advice. Our way of presenting that advice is sometimes very, almost, I would say, bordering on dictatorial. We as parents do it out of concern and out of betterment. It's not that we want to generate conflict, but it is perceived in a way which is detrimental. It is perceived in a way that our freedom is being curbed, we are just being lectured, and that our real problems are not being understood. Now, the problem with that is that the natural response of the teen is to just shut us out, to ignore us. And in today's date, what else to do if not speak to the people speak to the limited number of people with whom you are, quote, stuck, is to, escape to another place, which unfortunately has been designed to be addicting. So there is a lot of market research, an amazing and a disturbingly large amount of market research on how to get specific ages of children to spend more time in a certain application or on a certain screen. So, from marketing point of view, things like A/B testing and all is like the extent to which this research goes is amazing. So we have a very, 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 very strong opponent in terms of that app or that platform, which we are trying to pull the child away. So the only thing which we can do is somehow, make the outside environment conducive enough that if the child wants to come out, or if the teen wants to come out, they will. And then not force them. Eventually they will. Once they come out and they start realizing that the outside environment is, if not anything else, at least bearable, maybe even enjoyable, the screen time automatically goes down.
So you're a de-addiction specialist,
Yes.
and obviously this would be one of the trades that you apply. So, and de-addiction takes time, and any sort of de-addiction, including the internet addiction. So do you run programs for people at any age group, to get them off maybe internet addiction or any other sorts of addiction? In which case you could share it with us. DK, we could, I think circulate that. And if somebody wants more specialized focus attention, we could get back to the doctors for, a specific kind of interaction or engagement. Right. So now, DK, did you come back with another question, or shall I go on with my question?
I was saying that, you answered it from a teen perspective, but for adults, maybe that's something you might like to cover.
Okay.
So I was coming to that, and this is probably an answer which is not that distasteful. At adults, we have nobody to really discipline us, right? So we'll have to take that stick to ourselves. So the only way is to limit the screen time. It has to be absolute. It has to be, 1 hour a day period. We have to be self-aware. We have to understand that if we have a habit of getting, getting into a TV series, and if we like it, we will binge watch it. It is probably, best to defer it to a time, maybe post-lockdown, when we will have lesser time on our hands. In de-addiction, we have a principle of, taking on activities which literally preclude us from doing the addictive behavior. So, or even in psychiatry, for certain disorders, we will ask people to actively do something which physically prevents them from taking part in the the dysfunctional behavior. So similarly here, they could probably, even go as far as to cancel their subscription, provided they identify that this is our problem. Maybe put it down in writing on a billboard in front of, on a whiteboard in front of them, that this is my screen hours, maybe from evening 6 to 7, and this is it. Beyond this, I'm not going to turn on my phone. So now there are, applications which will limit your screen time. You can install all of these, and these are probably, a lot of them are free as well, where you install the application and you tell them that, okay, Netflix, I don't want to spend more than 50 minutes per day, and it'll inform you at the least. And I think it's even possible for the app to lock out Netflix. Of course, there is no permanent solution. You will have to, if you want, you can get through to it. But a bit of self-imposed discipline will help. Fix a time, like till even 15 years ago or even 10 years ago, we used to wait for a certain time in the day before we used to be able to watch something, because wo TV pe utna hi baje aata tha, right? So maybe if we do something like this, that, there'll be one episode per day at 6 o'clock. But it's more difficult in adults because, as we said, kids, we ourselves who will have to do this. Maybe we can take on certain things which make it more difficult for us to binge watch, but really no better answer than that.
I think, Vijay, the message basically to you is try and forget your password, and move on to your Netflix connection. I think that's a short answer to your question. Okay, let's
Vijay, there's one more question.
One other question.
From a child perspective, it says, it's a very, very important one. My daughter is appearing for a 12th board and NEET. Please suggest some activities to make her de-stress during this online class and pandemic situation. So what can be de-stressing for children is a question that's come.
I could take that. This is a major and a very recurring concern with children themselves and parents, that children are, like I started with it, that academic stress is what is weighing on children's minds the most. So the thing is that the stress, first we have to sort of identify where that stress is coming from. So there are many reasons why these reasons are not the same for every child. For some children, they have prepared enough, but they are underconfident, hence they are stressed. For some children, they're not actually able to probably follow the course and they're not able to study, hence they are stressed. For some child, maybe he or she is not able to manage time. They think that they've understood, but they don't feel that they have enough time to do do their coursework over the specified period, hence they're stressed. Some children may be stressed because there is some conflict at home which is affecting them. So we can only address a child's or an adolescent's stress if we first get to the bottom of it. What is it that is making my child unhappy or getting her stressed? Why is she so worried? So talk to your child, try to pin down that where is the point of anxiety. So in case it is just that she has studied, but she feels underconfident, or she feels a parent is able to judge, right? But my child is studying, but he or she has performance anxiety, or feels that how will I go? I've not been to school for so many days. I'll zone out during the Viva or something like that. In that case, you can help your child by bolstering their self-esteem. You can have small practice tests, conduct a little practice test for her at home to give her a warm-up sort of a thing. If your child has problem answering in the Viva, then do a role-playing exercise. Say that, okay, I'll ask you the question, you answer to me. So that can be something like that. Try to reorient her attention to her strengths. If your child is good in biology, good in memorizing, or your child is good in mathematics, point it out to her that, see, you do this well. You have been doing this well. Show her her previous marks, her course grades, etc. Try to reorient the child to their strengths, because every child has them. If your child is not able to understand or is not able to follow her academics, many children are not able to do that, either help them, sit with them, if you can sort of tutor them, if you have that sort of time. If you don't have that sort of time or the expertise, then see if an online tuition can be arranged, because all of that is now available. If your child has time management issues, help her to plan out a timetable based on her activities. When do you get up? When do you sleep? When do you eat? You should plan a timetable, again, based on your strengths and weaknesses. So if you can do a subject well, assign less time to that subject. If you are weak in a certain area, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, then give more time. Guide your child in making a realistic and intelligent timetable, so that he or she can, actually optimize their efficiency. So, and if there is a conflict at home, sometimes, if your child is stressed, the simple reason is that you are stressed, because children are very intuitive and they're very perspective. and they latch on to your anxiety. So see, are you having frequent fights at home? Are you constantly stressed or keen? That could very well be the reason why your child is also stressed. So you need to identify that and address that. So if we get to the bottom of it, and if we deal with it like this, that I'm
the additional information that came in was it was regarding change of the schedule, exam schedules quite regularly. That is what is causing the stress.
Yes. So in that case, I think the best reassurance that one can give to one's child is that all children are in the same boat, and it is the reality of our circumstances. And it is not just that, because every child is, stuck in their home. So they all feel uniquely cornered, individually cornered, whereas the situation is the same for all of them. So one can just turn their attention to the fact that it's not just you who has to deal with it. Every child has to deal with it, and they will deal with it. And all you need to do is prepare and just appear for the exam whenever the timetable comes in or the schedule comes in.
Thank you. One question which is very important and it's been on the minds of many people is this time around the severity of the pandemic has been so bad that everybody has heard of or experienced some relative or a colleague who's lost his life. There are people struggling to cope with this kind of trauma. And in many cases, this loss of life happens without any absolute closure within the family because of the constraints of COVID. So, Dr. Rishi, what is your advice to people? How do we get them out of whatever depression they've gotten themselves into? What would be the right approach?
Right. So that unfortunately is the truth of the situation today. What we must realize is that in every religious faith, there is a ritual which is associated with a person's passing, and this ritual often lasts for days, if not weeks, and this ritual is very, very important because this helps us to come to terms with the fact that somebody has passed. And as you said, in today's scenario, this is the thing which we are being deprived of. So I think if something like this happens, the first and the most important thing to do is that somehow carry out some ritual, maybe even if we don't have the person's mortal remains with us, somehow perform these religious rituals to the best of our ability, despite not having access to the person themselves. So because the thing is that these have a purpose. These sort of bring us aware to the fact, make us aware of the fact that that person is really gone. Because the first stage of trauma and shock is denial, that we don't really accept the fact that it has gone. And if this denial is not effectively managed, we can somehow associate very, very negative schema, negative thought process with this. So, and in these religious all our religious practices, whatever our faith may be, are extremely important. And I would say that they have been, religion has been doing psychotherapy far before the mental health professionals got to it, and then it's a fact. It's a fact. So we must somehow complete all the rituals, however truncated, however abbreviated, with the consultation of whatever religious sort of expert we consider. So I would feel that if there is one thing which we can do, we should do this, because it definitely does help, even though it may seem odd, and to some people it may seem close to blasphemous, but we have to do it because these have a purpose, and it helps. We may not feel so going into it, but by the time we are on the other side of it, we will realize that this really does help.
So thank you for that response, Dr. Rishi Gupta. And my next question to both of you is, we are out of time, but can you spare another 5 to 6 minutes for one or two questions more? Seema, is that all right with you as well?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Fine. So there is one other question that was raised in our earlier discussions, which was there is a lot of this anxiety and stress is weighing very heavily upon you. And but some of us, express it. Some of us lock it up inside ourselves. So you were talking about a term which is an imminent breakdown, which is that something is building up and you could react very, very adversely at some point. So how do you identify these situations, and how do you preempt these situations?
Okay. So the signs of imminent breakdown would be when we start developing signs of, say, clinical depression or clinical anxiety disorders. So, for example, in depression, we would say that one of the major, danger signs would be suicidal or self-harm ideation, even if it is not even frank suicidal ideation, but just a wish to die. That I myself won't do anything to me, but it would be better if my life somehow ended. If somebody starts getting even this thought, then it may actually be time to sort of start seeking help. If our sleep starts getting disturbed persistently, so 1 or 2 days is fine, but if beyond 1 or 2 days, if we feel that we are not sleeping despite the best of our efforts, for example, we are turning off our phone at the right time, we are not taking tea or coffee at night, we are ensuring a peaceful sleep environment which is free of disturbing lights, disturbing sound. Despite that, if we feel that we are unable to go to sleep, or repeatedly waking up non-refreshed in the morning, that is again something which we should be very careful about. And the third thing is the classical, what we call the cognitive triad in depression, which is helplessness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. If we are experiencing any or more than one of these symptoms persistently for more than a few days in situations which would normally not make us feel sad. So for example, if we, as mentioned earlier, if we do hear of somebody close to us passing away, it's very, very natural to experience these feelings. But suppose we are at home, interacting with our children, interacting with our spouse or parents, and there is some good news, and we still are not able to enjoy it appropriately, and if we still feel sad or anxious and hopeless or helpless, it is probably time to seek help, and it is probably time to seek professional help and get these symptoms sorted out.
Right. One final question from me, then I'll hand over to DK for anything from his side and closure. And this is the business situation where despite all that is happening around us, many of us are expected to, meet our sales targets and try to keep up the contact with customers. There's a pressure on some numbers and targets, etc. But at the same time, there is a active feeling of loss of control. You have very little, control over what happens, whether you can really gain access to the customer to make your pitch. So on the one hand, you have this tremendous feeling of, a loss of control at home. And on the other hand, there is a need for all of us to meet our targets to some extent, or to keep our companies afloat. So what is your advice to such people who are, trying to balance between these two sides?
These two things, right? I would like to answer that by telling the basic model of illness which we follow nowadays, which is an interaction between the so-called host, that is us, and our environment. So the basic model of any illness in today's date is that there is some sort of an issue either with the environment or with the host. Now, what you are referring to is a problematic environment, that there are certain, work, I would not say problematic, a stress generating environment, that there are certain targets which we have to meet, and it is non-negotiable for so many reasons. And in today's day and age, the circumstances are not letting us manage those targets effectively. And sometimes it's not possible to correct those circumstances as well. Right. So then I would say that we turn our attention to the host and see what can be done to the host itself. If the environment is unchanging, what the host itself can do. In simple words, what is it that we can do to at least reduce the effect of this environmental stress on ourselves? A few, apart from the more obvious things, like definitely maintaining a schedule, having a clear demarcation between work and home. Even if you're working, say, a 12-hour or a 13-hour day, you log in at 8 a.m., you log out at 9 p.m. At least make that demarcation, that 7:59 is my time and it's only from 8 o'clock that I start working. And 9 o'clock, I log off, and from 9:01 onwards, it is my time. And during this time, I will not, if it is possible, I'll not think of work, and I'll not, sort of worry about something. I'll worry about work at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that is the first thing. And the second thing is certain anxiety relieving exercises. I would like to name two particularly. One is something called abdominal breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. This is something which can easily be looked up on YouTube. There are so many, there are so many videos, very good videos teaching how to do this. So abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing. And second is what is called JPMR, progressive muscle relaxation. Again, these are two techniques which can be done by anybody. And these are very easy to learn. If you just Google or you search YouTube for this, we are going to find numerous videos which are going to demonstrate this. If we are feeling...
Thank you, doctor. And right now, I would like to invite Dimitrov to come back, and if there's anything final that you would like to say or any question that may have been missed out, please take care of it.
No, thanks, Vijay. I think that there have been several questions. One thing with this particular talk there's been a lot of questions. The Q&A has been very, very active. It is difficult to get all questions here. Dr. Rishi has been kind enough to answer some of them directly so you will find it in the chat itself. You can find the answer. Thank you for that, doctor. And I was just thinking about only one thing, which, many of our industry professionals, employees who are working, they are all working from home and sitting in front of the computer. Contact is only based on the screen. Is there anything, since we don't have physical contact with people, is there anything to best practices to manage this lifestyle? Any general guidelines around managing this lifestyle? Yeah, Dr. Ananya?
Dr. Ananya, would you like to answer?
Yeah, sure. So in our current circumstances, most of our significant interactions are through the virtual forum, as you very rightly mentioned. So the only way to manage that is to ensure that we have some purposeful, constructive, meaningful, non-screen activities during the time when we are off our screens. So it is very tempting to binge on Netflix when at the end of the day, you're just totally, you're saturated with work and responsibilities and health anxiety, and escape into an alternate reality. That is a very understandable sort of a position. But I would urge people to, look back and remember and introspect that what did you do to feel happy before. Netflix is a very recent phenomenon, right? We did not have Netflix a few years before, and people still had ways of escape, means of relaxation and recreation. So maybe this is the time when we are locked in our homes to re-explore those hobbies or passions or other things which made us feel, made us feel accomplished or made us feel happy about ourselves. Somebody in the chat box has written about reading. How much can we read? My take on that is always that you can read enough. If you have, the best is if you like to read, maybe spare an hour if you can. Otherwise, that is a very good way to sort of again escape from the reality. Maybe read some positive books, something inspirational, novels, whatever is appeals to you. That is a very good way of also escaping, and not in a maladaptive way. Similarly, physical exercise is another thing which I would really very strongly urge, because it has been scientifically proven that when we do some sort of physical activity, it releases certain chemicals in our brains like endorphins, which make us feel happy. They are literally called happy hormones in popular parlance. And it has been also shown that if we do some sort of physical activity in the morning, just 30 minutes of physical activity in the morning improves our blood circulation to our brain, improves our concentration. And again, it need not be a chore or a task or something that we have to do. We can make it fun. We can make it appealing. We can do some sort of a group activity with, there's no reason why you cannot have some sort of a dance session or something that, connects you with your family, with your children. some activities like gardening, which involves a lot of physical activity. So these are the sort of things which we can come up with to some sort of off-screen activities as recreation, as relaxation, as escape. So that will help us to, the sort of sensory overload that we have by looking into a screen all the time.
Thank you, Dr. Ananya. And with that, we will close this session. Thank you, Dr. Ananya and Dr. Rishi, for very insightful answers, very simple, easy to understand for all of us lay people. And thanks, Vijay, for hosting very nicely, and to Seema and her team in ICEMA Secretariat. Very well organized session again. And to all the GC members for participating and also putting in your questions through the chat box. And to all the audience who has been listening in.
My thanks to you also, DK, and as Vice President ICEMA and Mr. Sandeep Singh as President ICEMA, they've been really inspirational leaders for us who prioritize the right things. And in this period of stress, we've done this kind of talk week after week for the last 3 weeks, and possibly have one more next week. I think that's thank you for your support, and thank you, Seema and the Secretariat, and of course both Dr. Rishi and Dr. Ananya, who have always selflessly and willingly, despite their busy schedules, have always come on board to help us and give us these words of advice.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody.